So these burning questions that we're asking each other bring me to my next thought. I am Robert Franz. I'm the music director of your Windsor Symphony Orchestra, and I am thrilled today to have three of my dear good friends and colleagues, Graham MacKenzie, principal oboe of the Windsor Symphony Orchestra, Faith Schofield, second oboe English horn of the Windsor Symphony Orchestra, and our dear friend, Cohen Mann, who joins us on many occasions with the Windsor Symphony. So, you guys, we are here today to discuss all things Beethoven, all things reeds, how long it takes for a double reed to burn, cutting your hand with a tube when you get upset with the reed. We've got it all right here. This is going to be something for everyone. You guys are going to be performing Beethoven's trio for two oboes and English horn. It's his Opus 87, which by opus numbers or the work number, that's a pretty late number for Beethoven. But the truth is, he wrote this when he was quite young, in his early 20s, because, well, because it was the thing to do. But the reason it wasn't published till later is that later in life, Beethoven was feeling super poor and he needed to make some money. And so he found this score in his desk, and he brought it out, handed it to the publisher, and made a little bit of cash on the publication of this trio. Now, if our audience is saying to themselves, Beethoven, oboe trio, I didn't realize he wrote an oboe trio, then obviously you've never attended a music conservatory or music college and gone to an oboe masterclass, because every oboist on the planet plays this at college. Tell me about your first experiences with this piece. Let's start with Graham, maybe.
Sure. My first experience with this piece was, as you say, in my undergraduate degree at university. And every year at Laurier, where I went, they had a festival called Wind Fest in the spring, and it was all woodwind chamber music. And so we did this as part of that festival. We did the whole thing on one of the concerts.
Very cool. And Faith, what about you? You're going to be playing
Uh,
English horn.
I'm sorry.
You're going to be playing English horn on this trio when we play it. But is this the first? When was the first time you played it, and did you play English horn or?
Um, I honestly don't remember. In my undergrad, we had what we called oboe class, which was all oboes of the same age level. Oh my gosh, it was so fun. So every week we played excerpts, and then when we finished with our excerpts, then we would sit down and read through a trio, and we would rotate through. So I feel like I don't even know. I I have no idea what I played.
What about you, Ron?
My first time playing this piece was at the UBC Summer Music Institute, which was like going into my first year undergrad. And I think we only got through the exposition of the first movement because we're all like high school oboists, and we made it through, just the beginning of it. And it was a lot of fun just to kind of dip our toes into playing more of the piece.
Have any of you performed it as professionals since you've gotten out of university on a concert?
Only one movement of it.
Okay, good. Well, I am really excited that the Windsor Symphony Orchestra is going to be your maiden voyage as professional oboist in this trio. Why? So, okay, the oboe is the instrument most people know that gives the A to tune the orchestra. Why is that? Why is the oboe chosen as the special one to give the A to tune the orchestra? Graham, as one of your main jobs in the orchestra, maybe you could address this question.
You know, from what I've been able to find out, and Faith or Ron, please jump in if you have more to say. I think most of us would agree that it's actually frustratingly difficult to answer why that question is, in terms of something that's documented and like somebody made a decision, like the oboe is going to tune for this reason. You know, it's, from what I understand, historically the oboe had the least capacity for adjusting its pitch level easily. You know, on the string instruments you have the pegs, so you can adjust the strings with relative ease. Some of the other, the horn, the brass instruments, you could adjust the crooks, right? You could pull them in and out to adjust the pitch. And with some of the other woodwinds, for example, the flute, you do have some flexibility with adjusting the head joint. And on the oboe, we didn't have that flexibility. But also the oboe has historically always had, a very rich tonal spectrum and a lot of overtones, which makes it an easy pitch to latch onto when you hear it. It's also, some people speculate it's simply just in the middle of the orchestra, though historically that may not have been true, that everybody could hear it. Ron or Faith, do you have any more to add to that? Like things that you've heard about why this is the case?
We're just the most in tune.
Well, that goes without saying, though.
I know,
Of
right?
course. No, I think that about sums up everything I've heard. I mean, it just seems to have been what developed. I think part of it too is also we've been around longer as an instrument than some of our counterparts, like the clarinet. And especially in orchestral settings, if you look through the repertoire of, all 104 symphonies of Haydn and what Bach was writing for, it was all about us, as it should.
There is actually a physics component too, as well, you guys. So the oboe is conical, which means that the tube is way smaller at the top end than it is at the bottom end, whereas the flute and the clarinet are tubular, which means they're the same diameter from top to bottom. When you take a tube and you spread it out and you separate the joints to make it longer and make the pitch lower, it doesn't affect the sound of the instrument. But when you break the cone of in the physics of the sound of the air going through, when you break the cone, when you pull the reed out, it can affect actually how the air spins through the instrument because of the shape of the instrument. So and I do want to say as full disclosure here that there are technically 4 oboists on this interview, not just 3, because that was my instrument. But that once you break that cone, pretty much you're toast as an oboe. So the oboe has to be fully compacted together to get all of those overtones to which you referred, Graham. At least that's my take on it and my understanding of it. But there's also the fact that we sit in the middle and we look really good, right, you guys? So like, okay, let's all look at the oboe and boom, here we go. So Faith, I mentioned this earlier. You're going to be playing the English horn in the trio, and the English horn is neither English nor a horn. So what in the world is it?
So an English horn is essentially a big oboe. It's a little bit lower in pitch, a little bit warmer in pitch. It's got an onion-shaped bell, which is super duper cool. If you're ever in Silesia, which is no longer in existence, ancient kingdom in Poland, northern Poland, or one of them.
You know what? I was there last week.
Right? Weren't we all? Right before COVID. But in their traditional church art, like if you go to most churches in North America or Europe, you'll see French horns being played by the cherubs. But if you go to Silesia, you will see Old English horns being played by their cherubs, which is very, very cool. So that's part of how we got, there are a couple stories about how it got the name. The first is call anglais, as in horn angled, anglais. And then of course, anglais is also anglais English, and things getting confused. And then the other thing, the other suggestion that I've heard is that the German word for angel, or sorry, yes, German? Whatever they spoke in Silesia, of English, excuse my whatever language translation, also comes across as, can be transliterated as English. So there are a couple options there for why it's called an English horn.
You know, I had no idea that there was this whole angelic component to this, but now that I look at you and I think about your playing, and I think to myself, this is a perfect fit.
It's so true. I mean, the only word my parents have ever used to describe me is angelic.
Angel. I had heard it thrown around a lot concerning you. Hey, Ron, the oboes that Beethoven would have heard in his day would have been slightly different instruments than the ones that you're going to be playing on in this particular episode. Can you describe a little bit of the difference between the oboes?
Yeah, sure. I'm not like a big historical instrument scholar, but from my understanding, one of the big differences is all the key work that we have now, which makes it easier to facilitate all the technical runs that are in the music, and all of the things that have come after Beethoven. So other than that, we do know that the oboes back then were quite a bit lighter and were very easy to play in tune, and that's why we got so many beautiful octaves written in Mozart and Beethoven.
That's right, because they were made out of like maple at that point, right? Like lighter woods. today they're made out of a grenadilla wood, which is a thick, heavy African dark wood.
Yeah.
Interesting. What, Ron, what made you choose to play the oboe? How did you become an oboist?
Oh, well, the instrument chooses the musician, right? Yeah, I heard the oboe for the first time in band. I played flute originally, and I really loved the sound. It's so unique, and I was like, I have to play that. And when I heard it was one of the most difficult instruments, I was like, now I definitely have to play it. It's a challenge, right? And I think that that was part of the thing that drew me into pursuing music professionally too, because it was always that challenge of like, you know, you can always do something to get better, to improve, and to like make a better phrase or to have a better tone, or all these things that are kind of on the horizon. You're always chasing.
I think it's interesting though that the sound really drew you in, isn't it? Like that was the element. I think for everybody it's sort of something, like everybody has their own sort of like take on what it is, but I love the fact that the sound sort of captivated you as a young person. What about you, Graham? What got you, how did you become an oboist?
Okay, to make a very, very long story very, very short, it's, you know, I think every musician, like Ron described, and I'm sure Faith will have some version of this, at some point was really captivated, right? They heard something in a performance or just with somebody in a lesson, and they thought, just wow, that's so incredible. I just have to do that. Um, when I was at the point where I had to choose a wind instrument to play for band, I was at a kind of rebellious point in my life where anything my parents wanted me to do, I didn't want to do. It was a really fun time for everybody involved. And I wasn't, for various reasons, the oboe was chosen for me. And truly, it wasn't until I started at Laurier in a business and math degree, and I was taking lessons on the side, that I started studying with my undergraduate teacher, Jim Mason. And I met the other students there, and I heard him play up close, and I heard them play up close. And it was this moment of, oh my goodness, I had no idea an oboe could sound like that. I had no idea an oboe could make music like this, right? And so for me, it wasn't until then that, at that point, right that week, I switched into music, and I've been on this track ever since. So that's kind of my story. A little bit of a roundabout path, but.
So if I understand this correctly, playing oboe was a bit of a punishment from your parents to do in high school. Is that right?
Well, they wanted me to, they wanted me to commit to it and see if I really liked it. And this, again, this is a strange time in my life, but during all of my high school years, what I really wanted to do was skateboard and snowboard. Really, like that was what I did all the time when I had spare time. And I would enter these, Kiwanis competitions and stuff. And as an oboist, if you're a decent oboist in Kiwanis competitions, you do tend to win scholarships.
Right.
And guess where the money to buy my skateboards and snowboards is coming from at that point in my life? I mean, I'm making it sound a bit too simplistic. It wasn't like I hated it, but it wasn't this thing I was really passionate about.
Of course.
It was something that, I was sort of made to do to some degree.
And I've seen actually videos of you skateboarding when you were a young guy, and they're pretty spectacular. So I get it that was definitely, it was obvious to me that was your passion, and you were either trying to like become one of the best skateboarders on the planet, or just trying to break your neck, or see if you could do this without breaking your neck. It was pretty extraordinary watching you do that.
I didn't succeed in either endeavor, but that's okay. I'm fine with that.
That's really good. It's really good, at least for the breaking the neck part. So Faith, so you're an incredible oboist, but you love the English horn, and I can sense that when you play. We've done concertos together, you and I, and so I wonder if first of all you could talk about how you started on the oboe, and then what it is about the English horn that drew you in.
Yeah, it was so about the oboe. It was grade 6 band, and I heard it, and I thought, this sounds super beautiful. And my school had one. I took it home. I have a younger brother, and like most older sisters in the world, one of our favorite things in life is to make our younger brothers happy. So I took that oboe home, and I spent hours just in the basement playing around, learning my first multiphonics without even it, just making horrific noises that my brother and my parents were just really troubled by. And I remember coming upstairs for dinner and I'm like, yeah, did you hear me? I was doing so well and I'm in grade 6 and I'm so in. And my parents were like, and my brother's like, I hate you. And I thought, this is the instrument for me. So sorry, Justin, I love you dearly. This was also before my rebellious stage. I think it was the start of it, perhaps. The first time I picked up an English horn, it was for youth orchestra, and I was borrowing it, I think, from a local school. I mean, it wasn't the best English horn of all time, but I just remember the feeling of when I, for the first time, sitting down with this horn. I was slightly older and had moved past my punish my little brother phase, and there was it felt like me. The oboe always kind of did, but there was always a sense of this is great, but and then I just played the English horn. And I'm like, oh, this is it. And it was interesting too for me from a young person performance anxiety point of view, right? I remember sitting down, and this was Detroit Civic at the time, and having to play first oboe on something and being so nervous and scared. And then I sat down, and I think the first concert I played on English horn there was Pines of Rome, which has a massive English horn solo. And I just sat down, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And that change in mindset that I don't even know where it came from, just that, yeah, it's for me.
Wow. So I'll just add real quickly that I actually chose oboe by accident. I was actually playing cello. We moved to a school that had no strings, and the band director said, I said, what do you got? And he goes, well, we have this oboe in the corner that nobody else wants to play. And I thought it was going to be the bassoon. I had no idea it was the oboe. And I thought the bassoon was super cool looking, but the oboe, I didn't even know what it was. He handed it to me and I said, oh, is that it? And to which he replied, yep, that's the whole thing. And I started playing it and it was awful and I hated it. And I just thought it was the worst sounding thing. And so, Ron, I wish that I had been attracted to the sound. And you know, Graham, I wish that somebody had, you know, sort of punished me by making me play an instrument, but it wasn't that at all. It was, but then I just kept playing, like, and I didn't, like, the band teacher didn't know how to teach it, and I didn't have a private teacher, so I just sort of, and this was pre-YouTube videos, by the way, so I couldn't just like YouTube it and see kind of how to play, and I learned how to play the oboe. But the only music that I had at home were these Clementi sonatinas for piano. So I thought, okay, this music is as good as any. So that's how I learned how to play the oboe, is by playing Clementi sonatinas on the oboe, which are really hard for the oboe. But by the time I got to high school, my fingers and my tongue knew what to do. And so it was, there you go. One of the aspects of oboe that I think is the most sort of mysterious and intriguing and can be ultimately frustrating is the fact that, and rewarding, I might add, is the fact that oboists make their own reeds. Why? Who wants to jump in first? Why do you make your own reeds?
Oh. You have what, 3 more hours on this interview, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll all jump in. I mean, I think the biggest thing is one is that reeds are extremely temperamental for, I'm sure, reasons we'll get into. They change with the weather, they change with the climate, they change with the hall, even they change throughout the day as you play on them, because the wood is so very thin. And so first of all, you have to be able to adjust them on the fly to the situation that you're in. You're also going through them very quickly because they are very thin and quite temperamental. So you'd either need to have a reed maker that was very committed to you and willing to sell you a lot of reeds. That's another aspect of it. And also, it's very personal what different people want out of their reeds, in terms of feel and in terms of sound.
Can you show yours up close and show us the 3 parts, the tube, the string, and the cane itself? Oh, look at Ron. Ron's got, whoa. Okay, Ron.
Yeah, I got mine here too.
Oh, look at you guys.
And Faith has the most impressive one, actually.
Oh yeah.
Wow, nice full case.
Okay. So I think people can see, and Graham, maybe you can just describe. We've got the tubes with the cork. Could you keep them up there for a second, Ron? Oh, there we go.
So here we go. So this is sort of the business end of it. This is the rundo donax, it's called. It's very similar to bamboo. And there are two blades. I don't know if you can see this.
Yes.
Good. There's a hole between these two blades, and you blow air through that to make the beautiful sound of an oboe reed. And here, this part is called the staple or tube. And it's made up of two parts. There's a cork part here that goes around a metal tube that runs the whole length of this, and that's what the string here is tied around, the metal part. And the string attaches the cane to the tube.
And Ron, what's your take on this whole reed business?
Oh, well, I think reed making provides us a wonderful opportunity to create our own special, unique sound. And across the oboe world, we have so many amazing oboists who all sound different. You know, everyone has their own unique voice, which they can sort of design into their reed making. But also, it's kind of a long and arduous process, mostly to learn how to make reeds. But then even when you're a professional and you've made 10,000 reeds, like you still deal with all the variables that come with cane, which is just like organic and it grows in the wild and it's basically a weed. And every piece of cane is different, and some cane just doesn't want to be a reed. So you kind of have to deal with, lots of reject pieces and, reject reeds as well that aren't fit for human consumption.
And Faith, how about an English horn reed? How does that vary from an oboe reed?
So an English horn reed is shorter than an oboe reed.
Yeah.
Oboe reeds tend to be 70-ish millimeters in length. English horn reeds are shorter than that, generally around 61-ish. It's wider. It's a hair thicker. When Graham was talking about the thickness of the cane, my oboe reeds, because everyone makes them differently, my oboe reeds at their thinnest point are 6/100ths of a millimeter thick, and my English horn reeds at their thinnest point are 11/100ths of a millimeter. So there's a little bit of a difference. The other difference worth noting, and when we destroy one, you'll see, is that the tubes are different. Graham and Ron have cork at the bottom of their oboe tubes. I don't. And I have a little piece of medical tubing that goes on the bottom. And then English horns need to use what we call a bocal, which you'll see on bassoons, bass clarinets, and the reeds go onto the bocal and not into the instrument. So there you are.
Just as a point of reference, I find this is always kind of neat for people to hear. So, on my oboe reeds, the thinnest point tends to be about somewhere between 2 and 3/100ths of a millimeter. And if you measure a human hair, and I've done this a number of times, it's about 6 to 7/100ths of a millimeter thick. So the oboe reed, even one that's slightly thicker, maybe, and that's still really thin, it's still as thin as a human hair, literally.
And any slight adjustment you make to it can either make that reed sing or destroy it completely. Mm-hmm. Have any of you ever had the occasion where you were working on a perfect reed and everything was looking good and you had a slight slip of the knife and it destroyed the reed completely? Has that ever happened to any of you?
Of course.
Can any of you show us what you do when that happens? What do you do with the reed when that happens?
Well, you just break it. Or if you're Robert, you break it into your palm and put a hole in your palm. But for most of us, we just pop the cane over because the tubes can be reused.
Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. Break it.
Oh.
You know what? I think that is going to be the shot that starts this episode. That was amazing. That was just amazing. Uh-oh, now she's gone black. She got so upset she didn't cut her hand, but she broke the camera.
The reed's revenge. cutting her off.
I know that's what they do, right? I swear I had like this scar on my hand, like a stigmata for months afterwards.
I think the only scar I got was from it was a late night and I spent way too much time on reeds that day. It was about 11:30 p.m. and I went to cut open a new blank and I hadn't had the patience to cut thin enough. And so I was pressing down on this thing. This was many, many years ago. And of course, just right in my thumb and
Okay, that sounds painful.
Okay, who hasn't had to go to the ER for a reed making related emergency?
Okay, I haven't, to be fair, but
I haven't either. But that's what super glue is for.
Yeah, I mean, basically I went and that's all they did for me is they just put super glue on my finger, so whatever.
I think I lived in the US for too long. I'm like, I'm not going to the ER.
Right.
Sorry.
I was so much more careful when I was at Mann because my health insurance there was not super great. But at Yale, they had really, really good health insurance. So I was like, I'm ready, like, on my finger.
Like, goodbye, skin of fingers. Goodbye, thumbs.
What risky individuals you three are. It's really pretty spectacular. Well, speaking of risks, talk to us a little bit about this Beethoven trio that you're going to play. What is it like to play this piece? What are some things that audiences should expect to hear and see in this piece?
I'll jump in. So this piece is just very beautiful. It's light. It's got a lot of character to it. We've got a beautiful sonata allegro form for the first movement. And Beethoven worked with Haydn as a teacher, and you can definitely see a lot of influences of Haydn. There's a lot of cheekiness, a lot of exuberance, and my favorite movement is the last movement, which is like very joyous and fun and splashy.
Faith, what is your favorite thing about playing this trio, English horn in this trio?
I think my favorite thing, other than playing oboe trios, because oboe trios are so much fun, and there's so many of them out there. It is like a niche genre that gets ignored so often. I think my favorite part is the way that Beethoven doesn't treat the English horn as different in many ways. There are so many ripping runs up and down that you don't often see when you're looking at other composers and how they wrote for English horns. So often we're the pastoral, we're the sadness, we're not necessarily being super duper technically active, which is more often the role that the oboe takes. And Beethoven doesn't seem to see that, which is nice because it's super fun to go ripping up and down scales and all that stuff. But
so the three of you are equals in this piece.
Yeah, we're equals. There's not really a moment where like, oh, look at that, I'm a French horn player just playing offbeats. Like it's very it's very much a conversation, which I think is my favorite part because clearly I like to talk and overshare.
And what about you, Graham? What's your favorite thing about playing this trio?
I think what I love the most about this particular trio is the scale of it. You know, there's quite a lot of good chamber music for wind instruments, but I feel like a lot of composers kind of wrote things that are wonderful, but a little fluffy, maybe a little on the smaller end in terms of length and in terms of musical depth. And unfortunately, a lot of the really big composers, they wrote a zillion string quartets, perhaps not so many wind pieces. And this piece to me, he takes three instruments and he writes what really feels like a symphony in the terms of its scale and its content and the characters that are go through it. And it's amazing to be a part of a piece like that, with the three people. So it's so intimate, but on the same time, it's on such a large scale. And if I may get on a very small soapbox for a very small amount of time,
yes, please.
Another, my wife's a bassoonist, so we're a double reed couple, and we really bemoan the. Yes, we some people have called us homosexuals, which I thought was quite apt. As both double reed, and we've often bemoaned the fact that it's very, very difficult to establish oneself as like a wind chamber music group and do that professionally. And it's very difficult as a string quartet and a piano trio, of course, but you can do it. And there are many groups in that genre who have done it and continue to do it successfully. It's possible to as a wind group, but almost impossible for many reasons that go back centuries. And what I love about a piece like this and performing it is, talking to people after and hearing them saying, wow, that was so engaging. That was so beautiful. That was such incredible music. And it was, hearing these different colors and hearing the way you played off of each other. It was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think that playing a piece like this can show people that, hey, wind instruments can play, as chamber musicians as well, really well. And there is great repertoire for wind chamber musicians. So there you go, rant over.
So what's really cool about what you said, Graham, and where I think this is really an interesting element for folks to catch on to, is that when you imagine a string quartet playing, all those instruments make music, make sound in the same way. That is also true of an oboe trio. So there's a chance for the blending to occur in a different way. That is the exact opposite of what a typical woodwind section will do, a woodwind quintet or a woodwind section in an orchestra, where you have flute, clarinet, bassoon, oboe, and sometimes even brass, horn, or other brass instruments, trying to get those sounds to blend. So I'm really excited to hear the three of you play this trio, because that's that kind of blending sound and that kind of amazing quality that I think audiences will be surprised by, for sure. Well, yeah. I really appreciate you guys spending this time with me today to talk about this oboe trio, and we're really looking forward to hearing it. And so thank you all so much. Thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.